of the most peculiar details we have about maps is the fact that they have to be altered, changed, in order that they might be used to conduct proper navigation. Yet changing these maps also leads to different projections that vastly changes the scale of the continents. Other projections can also change not only the vast scale of the continents, but also showing that we have one ocean. Is this an accurate map? Does this map enable us to see other lands beyond? Is it possible that there is a true map of the realm that we don't actually see? Join me today as we explore the true map of the realm. One of the questions that I've been asked numerous times by viewers, some channel members, and even people that I encounter in my day-to-day life, and yes, I do encounter some interesting characters in my day-to-day life, is there a true map that really represents everything that we have in the lands? Is it out there somewhere? What does it really look like? Well, I thought I would give you the best answer to that question in this particular exploration. Now, you may recall live stream when we looked at the Unknown Lands Part 2, I had some strange maps that I displayed. And one of my favorite ones, of course, shows Hyperborea being at the very center of the land, or the top of the globe, however you want to see it. Remember, I'm not so specific about that. And I think I've explained why on many occasions, why I'm not so specific about the shape of the land. There seems to be something, how shall we say, that's very programmed when it comes to the shape of the land. So by all means, you believe what the shape of the land is and what you really want to believe it, and you believe it for whatever reason. I will always ask, though, have any of us actually been in a position where we have the true perspective to see the shape of the lands? Well, the answer is no. Unless, of course, those astronauts are telling the truth. That's always a possibility, and I don't discount anything. However, if that is the case, why is it, how shall we say, somewhat ambiguous to have follow-on images? Well, perhaps it's because of all the limitations that they tell us, and that's all the truth. I know that's not what we think here, but anyways, on to what the real answer is, or at least what I theorize the answer is. Is there a map that shows us the shape of the lands? Well, these are the maps that we tend to encounter and we spend a lot of time on. And these various maps, for what we understand, they do show the shape of the lands that we see. And they do tend to reflect what we expect them to be. Now, one of the questions I may ask, and I'll ask you, and when I say I may ask, it's when I'm in conversation with the people I encounter in day-to-day life. Did you see the recent disaster movie Greenland, apocalyptic movie? And one of the questions about that film is, do you recall the scenery that they had of Florida when, the asteroid struck Florida? And they were showing live footage, satellite imagery, and video that displayed the entire panhandle of Florida. Very, very well rendered too. Now, granted, this was in a movie. And the question I would ask, and I'll ask you now, do you ever see any sort of imagery or video that shows you large-scale sections of land like that? I'm just asking the question, have you ever seen it? Or is it only available in that movie? Now, would we see something that shows all of Europe? Well, purportedly we have images and video that do show it, even though it's, let's just say it's not as well rendered as it was in the film Greenland. Maybe there's a reason for that. But can you even find even closer aerial imagery or video that shows you Sicily and the boot of Italy? These are just questions I'm asking you. Again, I'm not leading you to any conclusions, just asking you to think about all this. And so with these other maps, we see these examples. Of course, we have the ancient map of Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and the three continents known at that time. And naturally, this was the map that Eratosthenes was using when he calculated the near correct circumference of the Earth. So there's yet another discrepancy. There's all these discrepancies with all this when you start to tear these accounts apart. And of course, during the exploration, I was on the account of Hyperboreans, but for this one, really examining the shape of the land. Why do we have so many versions during the age of exploration, the age of discovery, when, as we understand it with the official history, the world was truly the uncharted lands? Why are there so many versions? Why do some show California as an island? Why do others not show California as an island? Why do some show the Great Lakes in North America and others don't show any Great Lakes or a single lake with an island in the middle of it? And that's just one continent. There are numerous other discrepancies with the other continents. I'm just talking about the most well known. And then, of course, we have other odd displays of these maps, such as this one, with this very interesting clock here. And yet, oddly enough, and I didn't talk about this in the live stream because, there might be difficulties. And I'm not talking, of course, about interacting with the audience. I'm talking about other difficulties, if you follow me. But I'll point this out to you, Prime Explorers. You notice that this goes from Roman numeral 1 all the way to Roman numeral 12. And then you notice this goes from Roman numeral 1 all the way to Roman numeral 12. It seems like your classic 24-hour clock, day and night, right? And then there's alterations for when you have light and when you have dark, depending on where you are in the land and what season it is. And of course, you can accept the mainstream explanations for why that is so, or there's alternate explanations that you can accept. But it's rather odd that there has never been a single unified display like this that's easily available that can give you better projections. It's also rather odd that even after all this time of all these observations, we don't have more efficient clocks. We don't have more efficient calendars. And we're stated that's because there's limitations with how accurate they can be, and so on and so forth. Once again, a series of reasons given for why modern technology, artificial intelligence, all the other wondrous things that we have can't give us the answer. There's limitations, or so we're told. And then, of course, the discrepancies with the arrangement of Greenland, something else that we noticed, and, of course, the appearance of islands that are no longer there. And the official explanation will be, well, those cartographers were fools, or they simply didn't know what they were doing, or the individuals who really went out and sailed and charted these lands were mistaken. But the question I'll ask you, and we'll come back to it, is just think of this. If this map was proven to be mistaken with subsequent explorations, subsequent sailors, mariners that went out there and said, no, there's no Friesland out there. No, Greenland's not oriented west to east. It's more south to north, or north to south, or however you want to say it. And it's a lot closer to Canada. And there's no land up there. It's all just a frozen pile of ice. It's just an ice ocean. That's all it is. Then don't you think that the monarchs, or their descendants, or the same nations, would do something about the fact that, yes, we had once published maps such as this, but they were incorrect. And here's official statements that they were incorrect. And we've had the cartographers, or their descendants, punished appropriately. At least that's what we would expect. But you look at all these maps and you see so many different examples and you see so many discrepancies in all of them. But yet there was never a single retraction by anyone for anything, oddly enough. Now, what do I mean by retraction? There was never an official statement that these maps were incorrect. During the time, of course, after the 1800s and in the 1900s, we understand that these maps are incorrect. But are we just going to take that at face value? Or is there a possibility that all these different maps that we look at have a completely different account to them? That maybe every single one of these maps, when they were actually charted, were absolutely correct. For example, you have this very interesting landmass all the way over here. Oh, it's just New Zealand. Yeah, that's not New Zealand. There's no way you could see that as New Zealand. Oh, it's Australia, and that's New Zealand right there. Are you sure? These are the kind of things that we talk about, and yet we have land plotted at very precise coordinates on this particular map. And, of course, this is one of the maps that does not feature the Great Lakes, but it does feature the great city of Shilaga. Yes, I still have comments on that exploration where people say, it's Montreal, you just can't read a map. Well, and then I respond with, which map? There are more versions of maps of the land than there are versions of the Bible. So, as I'm fond of saying, make of it what you will. But what do I mean by all these maps actually having something that's correct about them, or being correct in the moment? I ask you to consider the possibility that all these maps were correct when they were made, that these were the actual observations that were what they really saw with their eyes, the explorers who saw these lands. Now, are these maps that were actually from the end of the Fourth Era, Or are these the early maps from the 5th era? I am under the mindset that pretty much anything we have that gives us maps of the land, for the most part, we are seeing a lot of maps that are probably from the 5th era, and the early portion of the 5th era. Now, does it give the impression that there was something that survived from the end of the 4th era that became the baseline for the maps of the 5th era? Yes. But it really becomes problematic. It becomes problematic to know for sure because if something is obscured, we have no way of knowing for sure. I have no way of knowing for sure. But this map here, in this particular area, location undisclosed, yes, I can't share it with you on a Prime Explorer video either, but just let me assure you it's a very exotic and amazing location. And in this particular map, you see one of the most interesting layouts of the land. You see Drake's Passage, or the Strait of Magellan, truly as a passage or a strait, almost as a canal. And it's connected with the land to the quote-unquote south, or however you want to think of it as. But what I'm going to ask you, shape of the realm or shape of the land not being considered, is there more accuracy in this particular map? As it does show lands up at the North Pole. In fact, it does show the Great Magnetic Rock, the Black Rock, the Black Fortress, whatever you want to call it. But what's it really alluding to? And I'll point out some other details that I did not point out during the live stream about this particular unique location. There's some very interesting works of art. We've got a naked guy with a lion in a headlock. We've got some larger human beings with some cherubs subduing or raining down some horses. Very interesting. We have a guy attacking some odd creatures over here with a club. And we have satyrs depicted everywhere you look. And of course, the very elaborate cartouche symbol here. And then what's within it. By the way, in an upcoming exploration, I found a cartouche that actually has something much more terrifying within it. And you see what that cartouche could also be interpreted as. So, continuing on with our symbolism exploration. And other odd creatures that don't really make a lot of sense. Although this is a mixture of images, some seeming more benign and some seeming more disturbing when you look closer. And obviously I didn't want to push it with some of the elaborate possibilities with the meaning of these images on the live stream. But I'm letting you see them now. Such as this interesting apparition, again in a cartouche device. Very, very odd, isn't it? What are they really showing us here? Why do we have such a mixture of what seems to be good and evil? I suspect, and I really wish I could reveal this location, I think some of you know this location, but that this is one of the surviving locations that this map actually was made towards the tail end of the 4th era. That this might have been one of the last constructions of the 4th era, before things really fell apart. And that's really what they were trying to show in some of this artwork. Because think about it. If you have an entire worldwide civilization that not only speaks a completely different language, perhaps they had a completely different method of communication, and they could at least understand that the next humans that would come along would not be able to understand the language or have a means of being communicated to. And who knows how far they reached in technological ascendancy. I mean, if our civilization was suddenly to fall, and all this digital information that's on the internet is still out there, would a new civilization be able to access it, or would it be lost? Oddly enough, our good friend Carl Sagan actually posited this in Cosmos. And so, if that's indeed what we're looking at, then what's really the enigmatic statement about all these maps? What's the conclusion? Is what we're looking at here a true world map? Well, I'm going to let you in on something, and this is not something I could show. But outside of this particular room, and going on down the hall, there's about 9 other exact maps in terms of layouts just like this. And yet there's differences within the land. Some do show the Great Lakes. Some show the island of California. Some don't show land in the north, others do. Yes. Now, you have to take my word for it, and, if you want to completely think that I'm a liar, that's totally fine. You're well aware of the fact that there are many different versions of maps that we've already looked at that do show all these discrepancies. And as the saying goes, okay, so we've got maps that show different layouts of the land with different details. Some have islands and others don't. So what? And so what's the answer? What is the true map of the land? Well, here's one of the most definitive clues or hints: the enduring mystery of the Fool's Cat Map of the world. The full meaning of the 16th century illustration may never be understood. Actually, it may. Now, you may have seen this map before, and I strongly advise that you look at it yourself. It's quite intriguing. You'll notice it does seem to match closely to some of the other maps that we've looked at. And the symbol of the jester, joker, or fool is inspired thrones, playing cards, and comedic fart acts. But there's one particular image of the king's fool that has remained a true mystery among cartographers and historians. And in the graving, colloquially referred to as the Fool's Cat Map of the world, the intricate bust of a court jester, complete with bells and bauble, includes a face showing the world as it had been charted in the 16th century. And so that's what we have here, a charted map from the 16th century. And this is what we know about the map. Measuring about 14 inches by 19 inches and printed with a copper plate engraving, researchers estimate that the map dates between 1580 and 1590. So they have no clue. That's because it matches the oval map projections, the Ortelius map projections, and I've heard that pronounced 5,000 different ways. So by all means, if you know a better way to pronounce it, let me know. You know how I like caring about pronunciations. The Fool's Cat Map of the world isn't the first time the world has been visually mocked by a gesture. And of course, they try to attribute it to the various cartographers at the time and who was jailed for judiciary astrology. Interesting that they jailed somebody for that in the 1500s, and they know about that very specifically, but they don't know who actually composed this map, I guess. And they state that they believe that they know who composed the map, but they do correctly conclude that it's created an array of deep and dark interpretations of the world. I wonder why. The shoulder belts medallions include various proverbs, including, "Oh, the worries of the world." Traditionally, the fool was one of the only people who could freely criticize the monarchy. Well, why on earth is that? Can fools freely criticize the government today? I leave that to you to decide. Some academics have thus interpreted that the map was created as a commentary on the inaccuracy of depictions and charts of the world in an age where much of it had yet to be thoroughly documented and discovered. Yes. Maps of this era were even known to be altered visually to support certain political ends. Now, isn't that intriguing? This author, and indeed many people out there, are well aware of the fact that this did occur in the past, that things were altered to support certain political ends. So I will just ask the question that I always ask every single day, and I never get a good answer to every single day. If maps, and many, many other things, could be altered in any way to support certain political ends, then why not the official account of history? Why would that not be altered to support certain political ends? Well, because it's very well documented that even tyrants such as Napoleon support the honest pursuit of true history and scientific objectives. And I'm dead serious, that's the answer that you'll get. Anyways, one way of reading the image would suggest that all seemingly universal truths, all apparent trustworthy knowledge, or authoritative maps are partial and untrustworthy in that they conceal a hidden social ordering. Not to mention, they also conceal something else. They conceal the fact that no matter how good the cartographer is, they cannot actually compose or draw the full hidden map of the world. Others see a more melancholy outlook on the world. The Latin phrases inscribed on the jester's capstaff and shoulder belt lament the vanity of the world and the foolishness of those who love it. Some might try to attribute that to the Gnostics. Of course, we can't ask any Gnostics because every single one of them were killed. On the staff is the phrase, "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And one of the medallions of the shoulder belt says, "Oh, the worries of the world." The quote on the bottom of the map sums up the message of the map. "The number of fools is infinite." That's probably one of the truest statements out there, isn't it? But yet, Is it someone playing the fool, or is it someone being the fool? And if you really want to understand why the fool could criticize the monarchy, watch the film The Northman, which, fortuitously enough, the fool is portrayed by Willem Dafoe. I'm not kidding. The world is quite literally a foolish place. The uncomfortable truth told by this map is that the world is a somber, irrational, and dangerous place, and that life on it is a nasty, brutish, and short. Well, that's one way to look at it. But something else I want to go back to. If you look at different interpretations and other, how shall we say, esoteric information about maps, you may recall that one of the concepts that I've looked at many times is the tesseract, or the fourth dimension. But I don't think I've ever actually explained how the fourth dimension really operates. And you look at this animated GIF here of the hypercube, as they call it, or the nested cube. The problem is, it's not an accurate representation. The reality is you can't accurately represent the fourth dimension and the third dimension, and really what you're looking at and what I'm looking at right now is the second dimension representation of the fourth dimension. There really is no cube within the cube. What it really is all this simultaneously coexists. Well, how exactly does that make sense? How can you have a cube within a cube? What does it really mean? Well, there's an entirely different way of looking at it. And oddly enough, this particular individual who is talking about actually mapping out the third dimension on the fourth dimension, or perhaps I should say visualizing the fourth dimension by mapping it onto the third dimension, using the tesseract, of course. And you might recall that a classic cross, a two-dimensional cross, is folded up and it becomes the cube. In other words, the real nature of the world. Or does it? Because remember that we see the three-dimensional cross. And when you fold up the three-dimensional cross, you end up getting the tesseract, or the hypercube. Now remember, that's just a representation. What does a hypercube really look like? Well, not just think of a hypercube. Think of a hypersphere. And what would a hypersphere really look like? Well, they do a decent job trying to depict it here, where they show the different spheres and the different lands actually being coexisting. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, they try to do it here, but again, you're limited. There's another way to look at it. Oddly enough, Steam Workshop probably has one of the best representations of it. And what they show is that each of the planes that make up this three-dimensional cross, imagine that each of these planes are a different map of the land. A different map made at a different time with the changing nature of the land. And yet, the reason that there's a changing nature of the land is that they all coexist. I know what I'm saying sounds relatively out there, but just stay with me for a moment. So just imagine that S is one map of the lands. A is another map of the lands. B is another map of the lands, and so on and so forth. And yet, it's possible that all of these different actual physical existences coexist at the same time. Now you're probably asking, well, how is that possible? It's possible if you're in the true fourth dimension, if the nature of our existence really is four-dimensional. Now I can't prove it, and there may be a lot of variations on it, but perhaps that's what was really understood by the last civilization. Perhaps they'd achieved that awareness and it was lost. And the Fool's Cat map was really just a little bit of a warning, or maybe they were even poking fun at realizing that the knowledge would be lost. Or maybe they didn't have a sense of humor at all, who knows? I have no idea what the society was like in the previous civilization. Or maybe that was their best way of trying to throw us a clue. Because you look at how these layers can actually be built upon one another and yet coexist. So then the question would be, okay, well, how do I jump from one layer to another? How do I go to the lands where there are no Great Lakes, just an example? Or maybe I want to go to the lands where California's an island. Sounds like a nice place. And who knows, maybe that California's operated a little better than the California that we have. I don't know. Just speculating. But if you really think about that, and you think about the concept of coexisting, are we talking about parallel realities? Or are we talking about something completely different? Are we talking about a much more malleable existence. In other words, our existence can suddenly change and shift. And this is how we can suddenly explain things such as the Mandela effect and all these other so-called psychological aberrations that we have relentlessly. I mean, if you look at this, plane of fire, plane of air. Think about the Terra Infinita map. What if it is possible that instead of all those lands being spread across a vast two-dimensional plane, they're really a much more limited plane, but they're unbounded? It sounds crazy, but yet it also seems to make a little bit of sense. And of course, I could be completely wrong. And so what is the answer? What is the true map of the land? And the answer is all of the maps are the true map of the land. That you have to superimpose them on top of one another. That you would actually have to make something that you can't make. Because we're trapped in the dimension that we're trapped, but our actual existence is a grander spatial dimension. And you would have to make something like a hypercube to actually make a true map. In other words, it's not possible to make a true map. Or, as always, I could be completely wrong. It's shaped like a saddle. It really is a sphere. It really is an infinite plane. Or it's actually a planet that's much, much larger than we could possibly imagine, and that the map is reflected in some small crater in the moon. Can't really rule anything out. As always, I leave it up to you. What are your thoughts on this? Why do we have so many different versions of maps? Iran is oftentimes overlooked for a variety of reasons because right now it all goes back to the whole marketing concept. Many fires. What if we're told we are the best, are told to us because of the predictive programming within, and they need a certain percentage of consent for their evil plans? Well, maybe, but there's a lot of evidence that there is no consent made for evil plans, that things will just happen. I mean, nobody seems to care that taxes are just going to keep going up, and nobody seems to care that property taxes are just going to keep going up. And do you really own anything when you have to pay property taxes? Well, I can make the argument, no, you're renting it. Now you're just paying more on the rent. But that's just a bad mindset, you know. So difficult to picture you in the military. Did you ask a lot of questions too? We don't really need to talk about that, RB. It was a very, very long time ago. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. But to answer your question, yes, I did. So, anyways. The salt caves of Iran feature immense chambers that dwarf visitors. Natural processes have sculpted towering salt pillars into surreal shapes, merging geology with architectural aesthetics. Yes, this is from a mainstream source. Guess which one? These striking formations showcase nature's artistic power over time. Ah, yes. Nature always has such incredible artistic power, doesn't it? It can always provide us architectural aesthetics in random locations and on massive scales. It's just nature doing its thing. Remember Jack Nicholson in Witches of Eastwick? When we see things of God, they call it nature. And when we see large-scale architecture in the wild, they call it nature, do they not? Yes, Kathy says it quite well. Anyway, there's a lot of incredible caves and a lot of incredible sites in Iran that are overlooked. Yes, they have their own version of the incredible hills of Cappadocia in Turkey, the exact same thing. These natural terrain features that they just managed to dig and carve out and then even build some housing within. Because I don't know about you, but I always wanted to live in these things. By the way, there was another terrible 1980s movie that was actually filmed in, on, and around the caves of Cappadocia in Turkey. It was called Land of Doom. Not exactly the best of films, but it is a real good way to see what these look like up close and personal. Yeah, and Many Fire says it, melted dwellings dug out. That's what it looks like to me. And by the way, apparently these places provide wonderful, wonderful climate conditions on the inside. I can't speak to that personally. There are conflicting accounts about it. But for whatever reason, there's definitely something there that people have found a way to make very cost-effective dwellings within. I mean, imagine trying to sell this for real estate in the United States. Anyways, so yes, they have those in Iran as well. And it probably shouldn't be that surprising. Now, going back to the whole concept of the movie Threads, this will give you an idea of when I was there. I just wanted to highlight the fact that the movie Threads, and if you forgot, that was the nuclear war scare flick that came from BBC in 1984. You know, the censors, I mean, BBC at the time, had a problem with Doctor Who because the Cybermen squeezed a guy's hands and you saw a little crimson. But in this film, they showed every form of terror and horror that you could possibly imagine. They didn't have any problem with it. But, you know, it's because it was a nuclear war educational film. So, you know, show as much destruction and death as you want to. Again, equally applying the law and rules, right? Now, something else about Iran is its unique location, right in between the continents. It's a bit of an intersection point, it's the Middle East. Well, yeah, no doubt. The Middle East is technically part of Asia, but it's also at that point where you can access all three continents, Europe, and remember that boundary with the Ural Mountains and the Caspian Sea. By the way, something else interesting about Iran, it was the area originally called Persia, where Alexander the Great historically marched through to get to India. And you also have the Gates of Alexander, the Caucasus region, right up here, just above it. Very interesting. So was this some sort of enclave or area that might have been holding out during the last reset? Possible. Not really sure, but it definitely is strategically located. Again, that's if the lands were laid out the same way. The Namakadin complex. So you also have these very interesting islands in the Persian Gulf. And the Persian Gulf, one of the most militarized areas in the land and one of the most patrolled areas in the land. So you see a lot of interesting examples. Now, let's go and look at some more of them. Oh, yes, those impressive caves, dwellings dug out into the very rocks. Yeah, is it rocks? And no, pictures from this area are limited. Access to this area is very limited, and even to this day. And whether you're from Iran or not, this isn't exactly something that you're encouraged to talk about. And Christopher with a very good question. Curious as to why we can't go anywhere we want to go on a plane and a straight line. Well, because it's just not safe, Christopher. That's the answer you'll get. And then next week, you'll get a different answer. Well, because we don't have enough air traffic controllers. And then the week after that, it'll be a different answer. Well, because of weather and a lack of air traffic controllers, and it's just not safe. And then ask me again next month, and I'll give you another answer. Yeah, that tends to be how it works. So, actually, Kathy, the Silk Road technically runs right through Iran. That was another exploration that I did that was, how shall we say, not received very well. I think it's still up, the Silk Road exploration. Oh, yeah, the petrified mushrooms again. Now, don't worry, we're getting to the really good stuff here. So again, this example, you've seen it in Turkey. It's dramatic, but it's not that dramatic. Now, let's get to the real impressive salt domes. So apparently they have these incredible salt caves. Now, it should be noted that there are salt caves in other locations, but some of the most amazing ones do really exist in Iran. And they have very, very incredible features to them. Now, of course, it's the process of nature. See Jack Nicholson holding his hands. Oh, yeah, heart of the world. Yeah, that's right, Vaughn. Tunnels, yes, Kathy, or maybe something even more extensive. That's where the whole thing blends. And what you'll see with a lot of these tunnels and caves in Iran is incredible views of the terrain. You can see a great long way there. And if you look closely, you'll also see the same very peculiar features. A lot of horizontal and vertical lines that are very symmetrical, and it just happens to be the work of nature. So, contrary to what discount Tom Hardy said in Prometheus, we'll be told that, yes, God does build in straight lines. Nothing against, what's his name, Logan Marshall Green. Yeah, he did as good a job as he could in that film. I always liked Prometheus better than Alien Covenant. But there's many examples of building in straight lines. I mean, just look at this. Did they carve all these stairs? Is that how these stairs were formed? Carve the windows and put them in? I mean, the incredible amalgamation here of the home with the rock. And this is one of the best images that I've seen. And many of these people do actually go to Iran or Iraq. They make the pilgrimage during Ashura every year and go to the Temple of Qadamiyya, which is in northern Baghdad. So just very, very interesting. How long has the structure been here and how long has it been like it? Who knows? You get different stories. Yes, Kat. Yes, RB. I think it does have a bathroom. Well, and that's a good point, Kathy. Yeah, how extensive is the tunnel system? I mean, where do they stop? Where don't they go? Who knows about these tunnels? Who knows the real layout of them? So, Hmm. Oh yeah, Brett with that old ET switcheroo. And who knows? I mean, they've re-edited that film so many times. Rifles for radios, just a hint. Yeah. Yeah, Golden Child says it well. Prometheus had potential, but sadly they didn't capitalize on it. Yes, it was that trope at the time of bringing up all these interesting ideas, but then not sorting anything out or explaining it or resolving it in the plot. Now, people say, well, you don't do that in your explorations. Well, no, I don't, because I don't know the ending. But I'm not writing a fictional story from my brain. If I was writing a fictional story from my brain, I would have an ending that would explain everything that happened. It would give you all those explanations that you long for. But if I did that in reality without knowing, that would be disingenuous. Now, here's another cave system in Iran, and you'll see that there's some incredible detail to it. Now, they say that this is a Chinese dragon, and they try to attribute this to being related to China in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, I guess China got all over the place too. But I always thought that really, really fascinating. Also, if you actually go up and examine some of these rocks, I mean, there's no way you could try to sell this as being the product of natural forces. I'm sure someone would try to say it. Yes, the erosion just randomly creates dragons and indentations, and that's what it really is. That looks like a giant head. You don't say. What are the odds, huh? What are the odds? Here, I'm just going to move the banner because, you know, the rest of this is all in Iran. But yes, there are a lot of sites to explore in Iran through any means necessary, and I strongly encourage it. Here's another view of it, and here you can get an idea of just how large these actual stones are. Baalbek, anybody? You know, they've got much larger ones. And you may remember that incredible quarry site, Yangshan, that we looked at in China. Oh, it's just the Chinese again. You know, they were rolling all over the place sometime in the distant past, and that's how we account for this. Now, let's take a look at some of the very, very impressive salt caves in Iran. Now, we've looked at some other underground sites, but I think these are truly impressive because the symmetry and the idea of true architecture is shining through in these salt caves. Now, here's the disclosure I'm going to make to you, and hopefully the channel doesn't get blown up when I tell you this. A lot of the theories are, and these are actually from mainstream people who look at this, and by the way, what you'll find in Iran is the authorities there say exactly the same thing as the scientists do here. Yes, this is a salt cave. Yes, we have a different system of government. Yes, we're a theocracy, but science says it's just a salt cave. But they do admit that these gigantic columns are actually around something else, that there's some other material that's actually surrounded within these columns. Very fascinating, isn't it? Tunnels, caves, all the same, obvious man-made shapes. Absolutely, Sean. And don't even let anybody make you question it. And Penny Fire says it. The salt, or whatever it really is concealing the architecture beneath. And even with all this covering material, you can still get an idea of how impressive this entire facility is. And when I say that this is a gargantuan, colossal facility, you could fit tens of thousands of people. Heck, you could probably fit hundreds of thousands of people in this one salt cave complex alone, easily, with room to spare. What was that saying from Star Trek 1 before they deleted it? Or a crew of 1,000, 10,000 feet tall. I don't know why they deleted that line. A little Dr. McCoy having his lines taken away. Reminds me of James Earl Jones. Yeah. Good one, RB. Very fascinating. Yes, it is. It is. So taking a couple other looks. Again, this is that previous site. But looking at it and just seeing very, very large stones. And then looking at just how extensive and large these pillars, columns really, really are. I mean, think about it. Is this just salt surrounding dirt? Is that what we're supposed to believe? Is this some kind of super dirt? I mean, why is this not collapsing? How is this even physically possible if this is something that we're told that it is by the official geologists? Oh, yes, gigantic salt columns. And of course, that's why I showed you that slide up front, just to give you the obvious mainstream interpretation of it. Many fires. Do we know how many square feet make up the cave? No idea. Ask 10 different experts and get 10 different answers. And frankly, many fires, I'm under the impression they have no idea. Just to give you an idea, though, of what is known, or at least what I'm aware of, these expanses go on much further than we have any real conception of. You might remember those caves that we looked at in Ukraine and portions of Georgia. They go very, very far down. So how far down do these caves go? How much space do we really have in them? Well, and that's the other thing, Nana, because the location of that particular site happens to draw attention away from some very other interesting sites that are very geographically close to it. So yes, I do wonder about that one and the other ones. So, well, could have been. Could it have been a ruin of an earlier era structure? I mean, so many different possibilities with all these when we look at them. And that's why I wanted to make you aware of these. And I mean, and you look at a lot of these, and when you're actually walking around here, and no, I'm sad to say it doesn't look like any of us are going to get the chance to go to Iran anytime soon, but you can find the people that live there. You can find some media on it. You can find some Facebook pictures. It's out there. But it's not something that's really ever going to be pushed hard by the mainstream because this isn't something they want you to think about. But even in the images, you can find signs of strange details that don't really add up. And when you're walking around down there, the last thing you're thinking of is that you're in a damn salt cave. Well, and that's a good point, Christopher. Are we living on top of an ancient giant mother ship? Well, you're most welcome, RB. I've tried to do some other explorations of this area, public explorations, and let's just say they haven't gone well. If you haven't noticed, it's been a very interesting week. So, yeah. I know, Kathy, I know. Always wanted to go there during the summer. It sounds like a great time. You can take the cruise, the Persian Gulf cruise, hit the islands too while you're at it. So, oh, there's plenty of tunnels everywhere. So that's why I think the whole concept that the way that the underworld is actually connected probably has a much more extensive clue than we realize. And this is just an example of it. And here in this particular image, again, you can get an idea of what remains of even the geometric precision. Salt, really? Yeah, exactly. Doesn't look like salt. And actually, there's areas where the floor is very, very flat and has what is very obvious debris on it. But I don't know. Sure, it's a natural salt cave. Huh. Are my eyes cheating me? Again, I'm seeing a lot of very symmetrical horizontal lines. And you can certainly research on your own and look at these impressive salt caves. Now, these are different caves. These are not the salt caves. I'm trying to remember. I think these are the caves of, let me make sure I pronounce this properly. Were these the Karza caves? I think these are the Karza caves. Makes me think of Wing Commander. But in here, they have some very, very interesting impressions that you'll see. So giant snake figures, some what look to be, I don't know, harpy figures, angel figures, cartouches maybe. Yes, and there are people who will try to tell you that these Karza caves are, I'm not kidding, natural features as well. Yes, so I guess in addition to making architectural features, we also have natural features that make symmetrical art. Okie dokie. Yeah, if you say so. Oh, and here's another one where you can see just how symmetrical the inside of one of these salt caves actually is. It's obviously they've had a digger or something going through there. They're mining the salt. Yes, it all makes sense. Or someone was exploring just how deep those caves really go, because you won't get an answer. Here's one of the entrances, again, giving an idea of the scale. So again, even if this is just a salt mine, why do you need entrances that are this extensive? And are you really going to expect me to believe that these entrances just developed naturally? Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But yes, and believe me, what I would really love to do is just go do an on-site exploration. I'd probably get lost in these caves. I'd probably disappear, and that would be, the end of me. So you think somebody would just say, why don't you go to Iran? We'll sponsor you. And that would be a good way to get rid of you, right? Yeah, I do wonder, Robert. I mean, is it something else? And maybe that's why I need to explore that concept a little bit more. Yeah, those Nephilim miners, they got to be tall boys. It's never easy when I talk about that, is it? But there are many more images of this. Here's a better image of those interior naturally formed artistic impressions. Yeah, right. I mean, let's not even beat around the bush here. I mean, it, you can actually see it being read there that they just don't really want anybody looking at this. And so think about this. Why do we have certain nations that are so controlled? And I'm not just talking about whatever government that they officially have within that nation. We're also talking about the entire way that the rest of the world views that nation. No, not just anybody can go to Iran. By the way, look at this figure. What the heck is this? And believe me, this is not my imagination running wild. I think you can see it pretty clearly. And yet some of the rest of these figures, and I mean, when you look at these closely, you will not see anything that resembles any sort of human being. It's very, very terrifying to actually walk through the Corbus Caves. Very, very terrifying, just because of these impressions that you'll see. Yeah, well, is it a boat or is it representing something else? That's the real interesting question about it. Well, and it's funny you mention that, Kathy, because yeah, a lot of them are declared UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Oh, just like the Motherland Calls, they're talking about declaring that big old statue in Volgograd a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So again, make of it what you will. But yeah, you walk in there, you'll see some really, really odd things that don't really seem to add up to what we think. And then there's even other figures that are lurking that have eroded, but still have enough detail that you can kind of make out some of the features behind them. And really the best way to see it, I hate to say it, is to be there in person. But if you research on your own, you can find some other high def images. It is very, very challenging to find high def images from this area. But I assure you this site is real. This is not some AI construction. It does really exist. And of course, the explanation you'll get is, well, it must be from some offshoot old Persian civilization. Okay, sure. Persian civilization that had all kinds of crazy, terrifying creatures and decided to make impressions of them in the wall. Maybe so. Oh, this is one of the most interesting ones here, because when you get a little closer, you can still kind of see what they're showing here. By the way, who here has heard or remembers the lizard men of Ubaid and that little story? Yeah, it could be. It is open to locals officially, RB, but access is very, very restricted. And they can only go in there as tour groups. I'm surprised they even let them take pictures. Probably because they think, well, who's going to talk to anybody from Iran, right? Well, I don't know really what you are seeing, Christopher. I mean, it could be anything. Is it a fossil? Is it some remaining life form? Or is it artwork? Or is it something from something else? I mean, I really don't know. You'll see angels, you'll see demons, you'll see lizard men, you'll see strange serpent creatures, you'll see snake men. Look hard enough, they're all there. And so that's really one of the most interesting details about the whole thing. Oh, yes, and then it also includes this interesting figure. And look very, very closely and tell me what you see with this. There's a lot of detail in this particular impression. And even though it seems to have eroded over the years, and who the hell knows how old it is, you can still see a lot of the detail that's coming out within it. Now, what is that? What is it really showing? There's many different ways to really interpret this one. And I think, even though this is probably the closest that we see to a human face, if you look a little bit more closely, you'll see that there's a little bit more of a, how shall we say, apparatus with the headdress. BC will get you anywhere if you get enough money. Yeah, maybe. Well, and I'm pretty sure the strange place is possible of anything. Yeah, that's what I wonder myself. Would definitely be great to go back. And then here you can see the layout of some of these other salt caves, or whatever you want to call them. And again, you have the same strange phenomenon that occur. So what happened to them? Were they melted? Were they destroyed? Were they subjected to terrifying forces? Quite likely. And so, in conclusion, what's my theory? Oh, yeah, the good old green man showing up again. It seems like what we're looking at are either ruins from a previous era or a mixture of ruins and life forms even from the previous era. I mean, it's really hard to say. How long ago was this? You noticed that, Nova. Yeah. And that's why I'm not going to dwell on it, because if you look at these too long, you'll start to see some very terrifying things. So there you go, Kathy. There you go. Let's see. And that is the last image. So anyway, I really just wanted to make you all aware of what's actually in Iran, because it's an area that we're definitely taught, conditioned to overlook, no matter where you are, whether in China, the States, Europe. A lot of people just overlook Iran, not realizing that there are some incredible sites there. You can see them, but remember, you're looking at images. So, can we always look at original images? Can we always rely on original images? The images that I've shown you, thanks RB, I appreciate that, are images that I've personally verified with my own eyes. That said, you will find other images that are even more extraordinary. And that's where I give you a very definitive warning. Earlier this week, coincidentally, someone shared footage of a real life griffin in the wild. But do I think that was an actual griffin? I would really like to see a griffin fly. Or is someone just trying to deceive us? Because remember, with all this concept of images that can be produced and altered, we always have to be very, very cautious about what we do and how we proceed. Oh, yeah. Well, Michael, if I go down that road, we'd be here all night, but that's a very good point. And we need to go back and look at those towers of silence. By the way, you might be surprised to know there are active towers of silence. Yes, there really are. So, greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Rest Tutor Orbis channel. And I'm your host, Lucius Cerulean. And after a little bit of a hiatus, we are back to explore once again and to examine all those unanswered questions that are not going to be answered by anybody else. But don't worry, you're going to be given many different paths of where you can go to make sure those questions are not answered. So I'd like to extend a greeting to all viewers, all channel members, and all others joining us. As I said, all are welcome here, no matter where you are, where you're from, or where you've been. Now, let's get things started by diving right on into this. The two towers. Does anybody know where this particular landscape that we're looking at in this image happens to be located? And it's all right if you think it's somewhere in the desert. I could understand why you would think that. And I hope everyone's doing good, and it's good to see everyone. I know it's been a little bit of a long time. And what is so intriguing about this particular landscape? Oh, there's a good one. Doc Shelley says Mordor. Yeah, it does give that impression, doesn't it? We'll take a closer look while you're figuring out exactly where we are. And it's all right if you don't know. Looks like we've got Jabba's palace over here. And then we've got some more interesting terrain. Now, I know people are well aware of the fact that I'm rather privy to the Iowa area. I will tell you, this is not Iowa, but it's not Arizona, it's not Utah. Some very interesting terrain features, though. A lot of cut terrain as well. Ah, yes, that natural wind and erosion, all the interesting things that it does. Let's see, check the comments if anybody's gotten closer to where we are. My bailiwick zone, Iraq. That's not a bad guess. There's a lot of erosion that occurs in that little location as well. Sean says New Mexico. Oh, Eric. Eric is correct. We are in Nebraska, specifically Scotts Bluff, Nebraska. Now, I'll show you a map of the state here in a little bit to give you an idea of exactly where this is located. But yes, there's all these interesting natural, quote unquote, rock formations that exist in random locations in western Nebraska. Now, Chimney Rock tends to be the most famous, although it should be noted that this is a nationally recognized site in western Nebraska. So very interesting, a lot of fine details to it, and you can certainly explore it on your own leisure. But I just always found this portion of the plains very interesting. Also, the fact that the plains tend to be overlooked. Now, here you have the state of Nebraska. Recently we've explored the great city of Omaha and then Council Bluffs, which is not listed over in Iowa. Scotts Bluff is in western Nebraska and what they call the Panhandle. Yes, why do we have so many states with panhandles? Well, we know that panhandles are artificial boundaries. They certainly don't follow natural boundaries such as rivers, such as the east and west borders of Iowa, which are the rivers, Missouri and Mississippi, respectively. But the Great Plains has many different interesting details to it that we've explored many times in the past. For today's particular exploration, though, we're not going to be looking at Scotts Bluff. We're not going to be looking at Omaha, although we'll spend a little time there. We're going to be focused on the city of Lincoln. Yes, Nebraska, one of the Great Plains states that wasn't admitted to the Union until 1867 after the United States Civil War officially. And we're going to be looking at the capital of Nebraska, the Great Tower in the Plains. Now, here we have an early image of Lincoln, Nebraska, attributed to the 1870s. And it's funny because I recall doing initial studies of Nebraska, and the Nebraska Historical Society even debates when their original incipience date was. Some people say it was founded, yes, they use that word for the Historical Society too, in the 1860s, and yet others say it was in the late 1870s. So we can't even figure out exactly when our National Historical Society or our state historical societies were founded. Well, that's okay. There's a lot of paperwork issues. We understand that, but I'm sure they sorted it all out. What are your thoughts looking at this early image of Lincoln, Nebraska? And by the way, aside from the state capital, does anybody know what Lincoln, Nebraska is known for? Yeah, there you go. That nice big palace in the distance, Sean, and that's what you tend to see in these images. So, yeah, there's always one building in the distance that sticks out. And does anybody know what that building is attributed to? I'll give you a hint. It's an old Main building. And the other thing that Lincoln is known for, well, yeah, corn. Nebraska is known for corn huskers. There's a hint for the other thing that Lincoln is known for, in addition to being the state capital. And yes, the palace does really stand out, doesn't it? And yet, what you see is a very curious lack of infrastructure, lack of roads. There is a railroad that goes through here, and we're aware of the current roads that go through Lincoln, Nebraska. But yes, all you have is this big giant building that just seems to be out there in the plains all on its own. Now, what's the veracity of this image? I don't know. The Historical Society indicates that it's a very real and very authentic archived image. It has not been altered in any way. I do not know for sure. I question every image now, and I strongly encourage you to question every image, no matter how authentic it may seem. Yeah, it was named after Abraham Lincoln. You were absolutely correct. They changed the name of the town, as they did with so many other towns during that time frame. So, ooh, hospital. That's a good guess. Actually, it's one of the old main buildings of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, famous for their football team. And if you go to Nebraska to this day, they're on the border of deifying their coach, Tom Osborne. Yeah, I know, a little sports joke in there, but it's kind of funny because that's what people are aware of it for, even in the area. And I recall in the distant past, about 3 to 4 decades ago, how nobody in Nebraska ever stopped talking about Tom Osborne and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So, yes, one of those interesting little things. Now, back on topic. Lincoln, Nebraska is where the state capital is moved to from Omaha to Lincoln. Now, when Nebraska was a territory, the territorial capital was in Omaha. And to this day, the state capital is in Lincoln. Now, yes, looking at this map, you can realize that Lincoln is not in the geographical center of Nebraska, as state capitals, well, sometimes tend to be. It's well to the east, much like Iowa City was for Iowa. And yet, for some reason, they never wanted to move it to the west. Well, why would they? I mean, you can just look at this map and get an idea that most of the population in Nebraska resides on the east side of the state. Of course, most of the population in Iowa resides in central Iowa and the east side of Iowa. There's really not nearly as much in western Iowa. But, capitals are where they're going to be. It's not because, there was a building there that somebody found and they decided to make it the state capital, right? Yeah, I think you know where this is going. Now, here's another very interesting image of Lincoln. No date associated with it, but it is associated with the historical archives. What are your thoughts looking at this image? Is this a real picture, or is this just some sort of strange mock up? The scale on this doesn't really make a lot of sense. You see a little horse and buggy over here and some structures. This is attributed to being a historical image of Lincoln, but what are your thoughts on this? And again, I don't know what to make of this image. I'll just say that flat out. I'm not going to try to present this as some kind of official or unofficial image, but it's just another one of those things that creates a lot of questions, especially when it is affiliated with the official archive. Ah, there you go. Composition. That's a good way to put it. And Kathy suggests not a real picture, and that would be my impression looking at it as well, Kathy. And KC933 says it looks dirty. I certainly agree. And the building to the left looks a little hazy, yes. And as always, we have vanilla sky, so we don't exactly know what's going on. I think I'm with Sean here. I think this is a composition compilation photo, maybe some superimposition that's going on here, and who knows what was really going on. Here's something else I'd like you to think about when we look at these old images, and whether it's Lincoln or anywhere in the land. Is it possible that somebody took pictures of pictures in the past? That's something that we don't ever think about. Because if someone was actually trying to preserve official historical archives, and by the way, who is charged to do that? Journalists? That's what people will tell you. But, going beyond journalists, if somebody was actually trying to preserve a photographic record, then how would they go about doing it? Would they take pictures of pictures? Did they have a means of copying? If you didn't have the original film, well, how would you preserve these pictures? Who was really tasked with doing that? And again, it's just a thought question. That's all I'm asking you to do. Hey, golden child. Looks like temporary structures put up next to permanent structures. It does give that impression, doesn't it? I think what we can come to, though, is that we've got multiple different impressions of how Lincoln came about. Oh, that's an interesting comment there from Julius. Potemkin Village. That's probably one of the most appropriate comments right there. Although it's funny how historians go back and try to walk back what actually happened with Potemkin's villages. Now, for those of you who don't know, Potemkin, a Russian aristocrat who was trying to impress the empress at the time, made a series of fake villages, or at least made them look like they were more sound and structurally they've been developed and that the population was happy. And yet they go back and walk back that story, saying that didn't really happen, apparently. It was just somebody who was trying to denigrate the reputation of Mr. Potemkin. Yeah, isn't that always the way it is? And don't worry, we've got a real doozy of a historical story for you on this one, since we're talking about these two towers. Now, what are the two towers, you're wondering? Well, we're getting to it. Here's another more accurate image of Lincoln, Nebraska. This is from 1875. And keep in mind, it's only been a state for, about 8 years at this point. And what are your thoughts on this particular image when we look at Lincoln, Nebraska? We've got some very well developed and well built structures here. And in the background, we've got the state capitol. It's actually the third state capital of Nebraska, although we'll look at that in a second. Yes, another one of these states with multiple state capitals, even though Nebraska's only been a state since 1867. And they got through 5 state capitals by the time we got to the 1930s. No joke, not even 100 years around and boom, we've already got 5 state capitals. Of course, since the 1930s, they still have the same state capital in Nebraska. So I guess they finally built or found the one that lasted, right? But thoughts on this particular image? Does this seem more like a photograph? It does have a more of a realistic appeal to it, doesn't it? Looks like they were cleaning up the streets. Yeah, that's the impression that I get. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. Interesting buildings here. There are a slew of them, no doubt about it, and many of them endure to this day. Builds look put in picture. See, and this is what I always like, these different impressions of all these particular images that we look at. Because it's in Lincoln, Nebraska that we have the state capitol, and who knows what else it was significant for. Now, here is Lincoln as seen from the Capitol in 1870. I like how they just write it on the bottom. Who knows when this comment was actually written? I don't know. It could have been written in 1885. It could have been written in 1945. Hell, it could have been written in 1988 for all we know. We just don't know when that was actually written on the photograph. How accurate is the photograph? I don't know. But you'll go look closer and you'll see there are some well-developed structures, a little bit of smoke. But again, it just seems like it's a hard scrabble of various temporary structures, and yet we've got our few permanent structures. So when exactly was the university constructed? When exactly was the town actually platted, planned out? And when did they build a lot of these permanent structures? Well, you can look at the history behind it. But again, when you try to go back and reconcile it with the photos, with the chronology, things just don't always add up. And don't worry, we've got one of the best examples here with a single structure, the most interesting structure, and that being the Nebraska State Capitol. Now, the reason I wanted to explore this structure for this live stream is because this is one that we really haven't looked into in depth before. 400-foot tower, and it's out in the middle of the plains. And that's what they'll say, it's the Tower of the Plains, and it's in Lincoln, Nebraska. Now, what are your thoughts looking on this structure, and when would you think, not knowing the history, that this structure was actually constructed? And by the way, individual from Lincoln, Nebraska, hold comments, please, because it's always interesting to see. Oh, look at that, Sean. You're actually 2 of 3 right there, my friend. Yes, it is considered Art Deco, Byzantine, and even Gothic revival. Ooh, rebuild. That's a good comment right there. Quite possibly. Sean suggests 1930s. You're pretty close there, Sean. Yes, it does resemble that tall building in LA, doesn't it? Looks a lot like it. The City Hall, or whatever we're calling it, the one that got blasted in War of the Worlds in the 1950s movie. Oh, yes, we have another figure at the top. It wouldn't be a state capital unless you had a figure on the top. Jamie, good to see you. North America, along with Oz, was pretty much wiped clean. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And especially the way that it was settled. And yet, even the story of the settlement of the United States and Australia has a lot of similar beats, doesn't it? And Kathy, you're right on with it. So, officially, this structure was constructed 1922 to 1932. And we'll go into some of the details about it because we haven't explored it before. Now, it does include Neo-Byzantine architecture, and you may remember this little cathedral of Alejandro Nevsky or Alexander Nevsky in Bulgaria that we explored about a year and a half ago. I don't really see the stylings of Neo-Byzantine in the Nebraska state capitol, but that's what the architecture experts tell us. So I guess we're just supposed to accept what they say, even though it doesn't make any sense or line up. Or maybe I just shouldn't believe my eyes and just trust experts, like I do when I take my car in to be repaired time and time again. And the auto mechanics swear to me that they've fixed it this time. Well, maybe they have. And then it also consists of touches of Gothic or Neo-Gothic or whatever we're calling Gothic revival these days. We have all these terms of this little subtle church in Belgium or wherever we are in this particular case. Yes, so as you can see, there's nothing like this in the Nebraska state capitol. Now, the Nebraska state capitol, here's the architect responsible for it, Bertrand Goodhue. Oh, yes, Bertram Goodhue. Or is it B-Trom Goodhue? Am I mispronouncing the name? I don't know. Look, I'm not making fun of the guy. It's just you don't really come across a lot of individuals with the name Bertram these days. But he was born in the 1800s, and there were many different names, sort of like Aloysius, which happened to be the name of my great-grandfather. Anyways, very, very interesting character. And oddly enough, even though they constructed Nebraska state capitol from 1922 to 1932, he passed away in 1924 when they were only 2 years into a 10-year build project. So I guess this just goes to show you that you don't necessarily need an architect to actually finish the structure. You just need somebody to plan it out really well. And oddly enough, they don't really credit it to any other architect who came in and took the reins of the project and finished it. Nope, it was just old Bertram here who did it all. So that's the story that we have. I always love these stories of these architects and their wonderful achievements. Here's another one of Bertram's projects. This is the Goodhue Rockefeller Chapel, or excuse me, this is the Rockefeller Chapel, University of Chicago, designed by Bertram Goodhue. And you can see maybe we could consider this some of that Gothic revival, I suppose. Also gives me reminders of that Riverside Church over in New York City. But yes, this is another project that was attributed to Bertram. And then even on his legacy here, oddly enough, you can see some indications of many old world structures. And this is actually on his tomb. I know I said legacy, but I get the feeling that someone is telling us a little bit more of a story. Perhaps there's a little bit more of a disclosure here on Mr. Goodhue's tomb, where we can see many of these great structures. One architect, again responsible for many incredible structures, that amalgamates wondrous styles done only in isolation in Europe. And yet in the United States, in a state capital in Nebraska in the early 1920s, somebody could do it. They could amalgamate all those structures. A 400-foot tower without any sort of problem. And that's what you have. Now, moving on from the story of Bertram, we now go to Louisiana. And this is the second of our two towers. Now, you're probably asking, wait a minute, how does the state capital of Louisiana, which is what we're looking at right now, relate to the state capital of Nebraska? Well, these are the two towers, the state capital of Nebraska and the state capital of Louisiana. The state capital of Louisiana is a little bit taller than the state capital of Nebraska. Oddly enough, it didn't take them 10 years in the state of Louisiana to build their impressive state capital. They did it in about a year. And not only that, they didn't do it during the Roaring 20s, they did it during the Great Depression. This particular structure is attributed to the efforts of politician Huey P. Long. Now, there's something interesting about Huey Long, and you might not have heard of him in history, or maybe you did if you watched Unsolved Mysteries back in the 90s. Nobody's really talked about Huey Long and recent circles, at least not openly or publicly. And here's the reason: because officially, Huey P. Long was a Democrat. Not only was he a Democrat, he was also a Democrat populist. Now, of course, this being the 1930s, we know that the Democrats had total control officially of political power in the United States. They had the presidency, they had Congress, but Huey P. Long was a populist Democrat. Now, of course, we know who populists are associated with in this current day and age, but in the past, apparently, he was an individual who was all about bringing in the population of Louisiana. He got himself elected to governor from very humble beginnings and then elected to Senate. And then he was abruptly assassinated in 1935. He was assassinated in 1935 by this individual, Carl Weiss. Now, really intriguing because the architect, or at least the leading architect of the architect firm who built the Louisiana state capitol, also had the last name of Weiss. So what really to make of this? Well, you can go back and watch the Unsolved Mysteries episode if you're curious about this. Yes, a doctor who apparently did decide to do some harm was the one who shot Huey Long, and did so apparently in the state capitol right in front of his numerous bodyguards. I guess they weren't very good bodyguards, but they did return fire and shoot Weiss. Now, the controversy is that Huey Long was actually assassinated by his own bodyguards accidentally. But the official historians assure us that no, Weiss acted alone and he pulled off this assassination. Who knows? What's interesting, though, about Huey Long is that he was not exactly a supporter of the New Deal program of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the president of the United States during the Great Depression, who was trying to address all these difficult concerns. Huey Long, in fact, felt that Roosevelt wasn't going far enough in the radicalism of his New Deal programs. And strangely enough, once Huey Long was gone or out of the picture, Franklin Roosevelt did, in fact, adopt many of the ideas that Huey Long had. Again, that's what the official history says. So when you go through tax season, if you live in the United States this particular spring, you can thank all these policies. At least that's what the official history says. But again, I'm not being political here. This is just what the official history says. This is why everyone pays taxes in the United States. And of course, it had to be expanded because of World War II. And none of us question that. So anyways, back to the story of the Louisiana state capitol. Huey Long managed to get this whole thing built in just over a year, and during the Great Depression at that. And yes, when you look closely at it, you can see that there are many symbols that really seem to represent Louisiana, don't they? I mean, here we have the incredible angelic Egyptian looking lady. You know, there's nothing more Louisiana or American than that. And some other very intriguing symbols. Now, we're going to be looking very closely at the symbols of the Nebraska state capitol. Oh, yes. And nothing represents democracy more than the fasces, apparently, right? And then, of course, the great eagles. But the official history says that Huey Long wanted his state capitol to be taller than the one in Nebraska because they'd been working on the Nebraska one long before they started building theirs in Louisiana. Yes, another one of these images that shows this very interesting angelic figure, which seems to be the main figure on these monuments. And we won't even talk about these figures in the background and what they represent. And don't worry, they appear on the Nebraska state capitol too. So we'll do a little more analysis on those. And then here's an actual statue of Huey Long, and it's rather intriguing because it reminds me of all those monuments that we've seen in numerous other state capitals. Something looks a little off from the base and then the actual statue of the great man himself. Now, of course, there's more controversy about Huey Long. Some people say he was a hero of the people, and others say he was a borderline fascist demagogue. I guess you read the history and come to your own conclusions. Whatever the case, he was assassinated in the mid-1930s, and that was the end of that. And here's a little interior picture of the Louisiana state capitol. Yes, the things that they could do in a single year in Louisiana. Very, very impressive. And please don't think I'm speaking poorly of Louisiana. I think it's very impressive because it was done during the Great Depression. But you may recall whenever we have a Great Depression or the Roaring 20s, nothing is really genuinely impossible. Yes, absolutely. Kingfish, that was the nickname, wasn't it? Back when we had political machines all over the United States. So, and then a great question, what really happened? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to theories here in a little bit, but sometimes it's just interesting looking at the official history and trying to reconcile this. And that's a good observation there, Kathy. Nice ceiling. I wonder how long it would take us to do a ceiling like this in any building. Would any contractor be willing to do it? I mean, you can go to Omaha, Nebraska today and see that lovely glass tower that they're building in the middle of the city, the one that they had to tear down an old world library for. But don't worry, they built a new library down the road. And it, of course, is a glass structure itself. And by the way, it'll be opening very soon. So, yes, make of it what you will. So, moving on from the Louisiana state capital, let's go back to Nebraska. Here we have an image of the first Nebraska territorial capital going back to Omaha. Now, this is what they say is that capital. Oddly enough, it's at the exact same geographic position as Central High School in Omaha, Nebraska. We've explored Central High School a number of times. Now, I'm not really sure what to make of this. This is the hill that you may recall that they devoted a lot of regrading efforts to, although they didn't actually erase the hill. They just made it a little bit easier for the streetcar, the trolley, or whatever we're calling it today, the electric car, to get up that hill. But it's very intriguing to me because this was the very first territorial capital and it was in Omaha. So you'd think they would have been keen to actually build the state capital in Omaha and keep it there, but they didn't. They moved it to Lincoln for a variety of reasons that don't really make a lot of sense from the official history. But, if you just accept what you're told, it does make sense. And here's this structure that was actually Central High School. Why do they always call it Central High School? That's in that exact same geographic position, according to the historical documents, as the original Nebraska territorial capital. So was this a subsequent territorial capital? Was this another structure? Officially, it was the original structure for Central High School. But how exactly does a structure like this operate as a conducive high school? I don't know. We need to have a big tall clock tower so the students can walk up and down the stairs and look out and see the entire landscape. I'm not really sure. And it's odd how many times we see the name Central High School. Sure. We get Abraham Lincoln, and everything's named after Abraham Lincoln because he is the greatest president of the United States, or at least the greatest president since the founder, George Washington. That's what the official history will tell you. Now, of course, you can have dissenting opinions, but that tends to be the agreed upon historical consensus for the time being. And so it's just very, very intriguing. Now, I'm not sure what to make of this particular image. This is supposed to be another one of the state capitals. It's from the archive, but this is another one of these really odd images. No signs that we have of any sort of road. We've got this individual who's doing what they said in Mystery Science Theater called blocking. Is he leaning up against this very small tree? And then another individual back here. But what to really make of this particular structure itself? Was this actually one of the early state capitals? Was this some other administrative building? Or was this just some other left behind building that hadn't been demolished yet? I'm really not sure. It's another enigma, if you will. And yes, Scott Baker says it quite well. That's kind of the impression I get looking at the image. And again, it's just an image. What exactly does it prove? Not really sure. Yeah, no leaves, open jacket, and it looks freezing, but I'm just going to chill because that's the easy thing to do. Yeah, that's another good observation there. Is it a copper dome or is it some other kind of dome? Found in winter. Yes, founded in winter. So. So again, many state capitals, officially there's 5, or 2 territorial capitals and 3 state capitals. We'll keep going. And this is the first official Nebraska state capital in Lincoln. And you can see it's a nice isolated building again, although very well constructed. And for some reason, I'm given parallels of the construction of the state capitol in South Dakota. And you see similar things with it. I mean, here we have the pediment. We have what almost looks to be some kind of incredible church or cathedral. But this is not a church or a cathedral. Officially, it's the first state capitol in Nebraska. That was built after they moved the state capital from Omaha to Lincoln. And it's a very impressive structure. But it wasn't good enough. They built a second structure because apparently after they built this structure, it was crumbling right away. Yes, this doesn't look like it was a building that was built to last. Well, of course it wasn't built to last. Maybe they didn't even put a foundation on it. Well, if they didn't put a foundation on it, how did it even stand for a few years? We'll get to the timeline in a bit, but I just wanted to give you an idea what these state capitals looked like. So this is the second one. Again, built on the exact same site with apparently no issue, much like the state capitals of Wisconsin on that little isthmus up in Madison. And here we have state capital number 2. And yet there was the same issue with this. Apparently the limestone that they acquired for this was just not very good limestone. Again, the official history says, and it started to crumble. So not really sure what to make of this. I mean, what are your thoughts when you look at this very first state capital? And keep in mind in the secession, this is the third capital of Nebraska. It's just you have the first 2 territorial capitals. Those were in Omaha. This is the first state capital once they moved the capital city from Omaha to Lincoln. And what are your thoughts looking at this particular structure in this image? That looks old as the first. Yeah, I'd certainly agree on that. There doesn't seem to be any difference with the age of the structures or what we're really seeing. Eric says it looks ancient, as though someone just found it going across the plains. Hmm. Ooh, radio tower. Yeah, good observation there, Eric. Very good observation. That's another good point right there. Why no windows on one side? And Kathy, big contrast between both buildings. And Rob with a good comment here. Yeah, huge, huge tower. It's almost as though the building wouldn't even support the tower, but yet somehow it did. It's one of those odd things in the older architecture. And so, was it just because they didn't understand the architectural limitations of the structures? What was really going on? Or was this not actually a structure? I'm not really sure. Now, you've got some images like this that show the work that they were doing on the second Nebraska state capitol, as though they were just laying out tracks as well. But, notice that the state capitol is already built. So it doesn't seem like they were laying out tracks to actually assist in the building of the state capitol. I mean, if they did, that would actually make a little bit of sense, using logistics at the time. By the way, I'd like to give a special call out to the individual who tried to address the logistics issues in one of the explorations by sending me links to some family lineage that had absolutely nothing to do with anything they were trying to reinforce. So I would say that was just a diversionary tactic. Look, if you want to debate with me, fine, please do. But please send legitimate links that actually have information on it that's pertinent to what you're discussing. If not, I'm probably not going to treat it with a lot of credibility. But such is life. Moving on, now here we have this other interesting construction image of the second Nebraska state capitol. And of course, we have all of our cranes that are just kind of sitting around. Thoughts on this particular image? Yeah, there you go. We found more tracks. That's what it looked like to me, too. And it does seem to give that impression because those tracks do seem to be in very good condition. I've been wondering if all the found railroad tracks were part of the maglev system. That could be possible too. I mean, who knows exactly what they had in the distant past or how distant of a past it really was. Now, moving on from this image, now we go to the fifth or third state capital of Nebraska, the fifth capital overall. And of course, the images that we have show the construction of the tower, as though we can just assume that the entire base of the structure was easily constructed and the most difficult thing for them to construct was the tower. Maybe so. Circa 1920s. Now we're going to actually look at a diagram that shows us when they laid this all out. Now remember, this is Lincoln, Nebraska, that city that we looked at of images earlier. And suddenly we have all these incredible trees that are all over the place. It's not the plains anymore. Well, I guess there's a reason why Nebraska is the home of Arbor Day. And if you want to find out all about that, go to Nebraska City, a city that's directly south of Omaha, and go to the Arbor Day Mansion. They say it's an old world building. They say it's a very old world building from before the Civil War. But if you actually go up to the building and examine it, you might notice there's some hollow sounds to it. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. It might be for an exploration another day. But what are your thoughts looking at this image of the construction of the impressive 400-foot tower on the Nebraska state capitol? Yes, there we go again. They had AI for this whole time. I don't know. You could do it in many different ways. I've lived in Lincoln for a couple years. It's a nice town, a lot of interesting things to see, but it sucks during football games. You don't say. Well, look, there's a reason why there'll never be a professional football team anywhere in the state of Nebraska. Yeah, that's a good point there, Dwayne. Construction or deconstruction. That's what I wonder myself when you look at images like this. No immediate power lines available. That's another good point. Ooh, comparative to Constantinople. Yeah, I do wonder on that one as well. So let's take a look at a few more images here. Now here's the tower as they've progressed with it a little bit more. Oh, yes. Gee, that's kind of funny. I don't really see the cranes in operation unless these are the cranes, or maybe they were just using the scaffolding here to move these incredible limestone or granite blocks all the way to the top. I mean, sure, they'll tell us what it's constructed out of, but again, that's something that I vehemently question. But that's just me. Maybe you want to accept what they tell you it's made out of. Now, here's the really interesting thing, and let me make sure you can see this image really, really well, and I'll move the banner for this. Now, here we're at the five state capitals for Nebraska. And yes, I'm skipping number two, the Great Plains, because we've already talked about it. But the really strange thing about these three state capitals in Nebraska is that they were all in the exact same geographical location. So you can see the footprint here of the very first capital, the one that we looked at. Completed in 1867, raised in 1883. So it only lasted 16 years. Maybe because that tower was too large and it fell over. Who knows for sure? And then we've got the second state capital here in the yellow, completed in 1888 and raised in 1925. Huh. So doing the math on that, about 37 years. I always thought these old world buildings were built to last. I guess not. And then finally, the present capital that was completed in 1932. Now, don't you find it interesting that the official history tells us that they built all three of these capitals in the exact same geographic location? Do any of you see any problems with that account? And again, I'm just asking. I mean, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Go ahead and let me know if you think it does. Looks like a computer chip. Yeah, that one definitely does, doesn't it? Raised out of the mud. I could see that for sure. We probably unleashed Cthulhu or something. We raised the buildings to cast him in another realm. Who knows? Maybe there is something to that as to why certain old world buildings will never be torn down. Unlike, say, Jobber's Canyon in Omaha, nobody had any issue tearing that down, did they? So those are the three state capitals of the five for Nebraska. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. So we have this little diagram that somebody clearly made well after the completion of the Nebraska state capitol that shows us the phases that it was constructed in. Phase one in the red, which was 1922 to 1924. Wow, they got a lot done during those first 2 years. And keep in mind that also involved digging this impressive foundation. When exactly did they do these entryways and these walls? I guess that wasn't part of that, but that's okay. I'll stop asking silly questions and get to the point. So 2 years to dig the foundation, build these two wings, another 3 years to build this central component right here. So it's 1928. And then just 2 years to build this impressive tower. And then phase four, they went back and completed this wing right here. How interesting. Is that really the way they built it? I'm only asking because you would think that, with this genius architect, old Bertram, making this plan, and even though he didn't live to see the completion of the state capitol, he was such a genius that he was able to design it to completion and not have to be there for 8 years of the construction. So it just goes to show you, no, you don't actually need an architect to build an impressive state capitol, according to the official account. But how exactly does it make any sense that they went back and completed phase four after completing the tower? So what, we're going to go add another wing after we finish the tower? I mean, maybe. And then, with all of our focus on documenting things, why exactly don't we have a series of photos with dates on them from the time, of course, that actually show the completion of these phases? Why isn't there a photo that was taken in 1924 that shows these two wings and nothing else there? Why isn't there a photo from the end of phase two that shows this part being filled in with these two wings? I don't know. Maybe somebody just didn't want to document it. Maybe they couldn't find any journalists in Lincoln in the 1920s. Yes, I'm being facetious, but it is very intriguing. It is intriguing that this is how they show us that, yes, the state capitol was constructed in these phases by taking a completed photograph and then shading the parts in terms of its build phase. Very, very interesting. Don't get me wrong, it illustrates the point very well. I just find it intriguing. Because remember, if we had somebody who is responsible for tracking our history, then why weren't they doing a more detailed job of tracking it? By the way, a question for all of you. Who's responsible for documenting our current history in the year 2026 and making sure that all these events are properly remembered? I mean, are we really going to trust journalists to do it? We have some journalists who say other journalists are liars. Who exactly are we supposed to trust? And how are we supposed to trust these people who accuse one another of being liars or accuse one another of being bought out by larger entities, whether they be political or corporate? It doesn't really matter. Or others that are funded by unknown entities, which usually tend to be generous gifts from very wealthy individuals or what we call philanthropists. Who exactly do we trust? Oh, there you go. Yeah, right. Sure. Academia is on the case. Yeah, there you go, Griff. Well, and that's just one of those things that I always talk about. I mean, okay, so who's the recording section in academia? Who is recording current events objectively? Who's responsible for it? Well, don't worry. The historians will come back and they'll read all the news articles from 2026 in about 20 years, and they'll come to a conclusion in terms of what actually happened here in 2026. You're not going to come to a conclusion right now because, as Alistair Cook said, you can't see the wood from the trees. You've got to look at things after they've happened to know what happened while they happened. That might sound like it's a little bit of a strange statement, but that's actually how things work. Just don't pay attention to what's going on. Someone else will tell you. There you go, Casey. Absolutely. And they'll have the final conclusion. So we didn't ask any questions. We can just trust someone else to do it for us. You are absolutely correct. So moving on, I wanted to take a look at some of the interior of the state capitol. So, constructed 1922 to 1932. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. And what are your thoughts looking at the image? And we're looking at the interior of the Nebraska state capitol. Art Deco, Neo-Byzantine, and Gothic Revival. Yeah, that's kind of a way I say it. Just a simple wow, just amazing, just extraordinary. Ultraviolet. I saw a meme that asked how anyone in the year 3021 that what JD Vance actually looks like, going by all the memes. Yes, yes. Well, and then take another example. What did Andrew Jackson actually look like? Believe it or not, President Andrew Jackson in the United States. There's a couple different ideas of what he looked like. And there is actually a daguerreotype of him, which looks absolutely nothing like those very romanticized painted pictures. So, an answer? I don't know. And just really think about this. I mean, we do have a more credible construction timeline for this tower, this state capitol, a little bit more credible, 10 years, unlike the one in Louisiana that they just cropped up in a year. But, granted, it's Louisiana and it was Huey Long, and, populists can do anything, right? Until we don't like populists. But we do like populists. I don't know. Depends on who's writing the article, right? But also look at the murals on the floor. Now we'll take a closer look at some of this artwork because it's just as impressive, but also look at all the detail in the walls. They had time to do all of this. They took the effort. This was their great state capital, apparently. And what exactly do these symbols have to do with Nebraska? Well, I guess you could say this was before the days of Osborne and the rise of the Nebraska Cornhuskers football team. So, we don't see them in the murals, but maybe if they'd been around and about, perhaps they would be incorporated into it. I'm being kind of facetious, but I'm also being serious because what do any of these symbols have to do with Nebraska? I don't know. You also have these interesting columns. Now, here at least we've got corn. I guess that's something to do with Nebraska, although corn is kind of generic. And you may recall there's been numerous researchers and explorers. I recall one of the most prominent being Howdy Mikowski that actually questioned the origin of our current crops that we use. Corn, rice, wheat, everything else. Is that actually part of our natural diet? Or is it something else that we created? Is the entire agricultural system from something else that wasn't necessarily the original system of sustenance that we had as human beings? Well, that's always an interesting question to ask. Is it something that was created to sustain us after a reset event? In other words, we went back to square one and completely supplanted what we subsisted on in a previous civilization. Just think about that. Because if you eat different foods from different locations, different origins, do they have different effects on you? There's always the new diet. So, yes, corn is biblical. It is mentioned quite extensively, and in all the different versions, I might add. That's a good one there, Casey. Why can't we digest corn? It's definitely not an easy thing to digest. That's a very good point. There's another image for you looking up in the Nebraska state capitol. Yes. And what do these symbols all mean? I mean, I'll just be honest with you. I have no idea. I'm not exactly sure what they have to do with Nebraska. But maybe if they get to the part of adding Tom Osborne to the Hall of Fame there, perhaps they'll build a big giant statue of him out front. I don't know. I don't know. And look, if that's what they want to do, hey, that's up to the state to do that. And I'm not making fun of it. I mean, they really do have a regard for that in Nebraska. It's just interesting trying to identify what's the origin of all these symbols in this very impressive state capital that they have. Makes about as much sense as that pantheon of gods and goddesses that they have in the Iowa state capitol. Why would anybody be doing this in the 1920s and the early 1930s? When exactly was this all done? And who specifically was responsible for all this artwork? I mean, it certainly wasn't the architect. He had passed away by the time they were actually doing this. So, what artists were responsible for this? Those are always the questions that you never really get any good answers to. And by all means, send me another link talking about some genealogical survey or search on something that has nothing to do with the topic. You're still not answering the question. Thank you, New West Reset. I appreciate that, and welcome to the new members. There's words around the ring in blue. I wonder what it says. And I intend to get on site and take a closer look at this particular structure. I just haven't had the chance to yet. But I just wanted to introduce it to you because we haven't really taken a look at the symbols of Nebraska here. What words do we have? Behold. Huh. Odd letters. Is that before we had T's and S's? YS. It seasons. Is that supposed to be a T? Very, very interesting. Labor. Labor spelled the British English way and not the American English way. So interesting details that you can look into it. And this just gives you an idea of how large the interior is, and yet you get an impression that you're in something else entirely with the Nebraska state capitol. What exactly are these blocks made out of? Are these limestone? Are these sandstone? Are these some kind of special type of concrete? You also have these interesting murals, and then, of course, these wonderful, wonderful chandeliers that look very different. But somebody could come into the state capitol and film a very convincing movie, couldn't they? Some science fiction movie, maybe. One of the many, many sequels that we have coming up to Star Wars. Oh, look at this. Again, we have these very impressive columns. Are these made out of marble? Or are they made out of something else? Seem to be holding up quite well. I mean, the structure is coming up on 100 years old. It's not as old as some of the other state capitals, but again, you see things like this. What exactly does this represent? Well, this looks like something that we could see would actually line up with our understanding of Nebraska. And you do see some symbols that do seem to make sense, but then there's others that don't make sense. So it's hard to tell. And were those symbols part of the original structure or were they added later? That's just something we don't know. Okay, cattlemen, yes, that makes sense. Nebraska's known for beef, it's known for corn, at least until you get further out west, and then it becomes known for exotic landscapes. But it's intriguing to really try to understand exactly when and where these symbols were added. For example, what do these symbols mean? Is it supposed to be some representation of corn? Well, no, it's Art Deco. So whenever we say Art Deco, that's the hand wave to say we have Mayan and Egyptian symbols. What the heck are Mayan and Egyptian symbols? I don't know. They're whatever we say they are for the day. It seems to be the way it is. And then here's another look back at that incredible hall or gallery or whatever you want to call it. Now, we do actually have a picture here of Old Glory. But how old is Old Glory? And why exactly, when somebody could build incredible symbols such as this in the wall, would anybody ever want to settle for utilizing cloth flags for symbols? That's just a question I always had. If you could actually build a lasting symbol into your architecture, whether it's a building or a monument, why wouldn't you go with something like this as the symbol of your nation state instead of a flag? Well, we got a picture of our flag here. Now, again, was this part of the original structure? Was this added later? I don't know. I will tell you, though, that all of these state capitals, to include the Nebraska state capitol, have been extensively renovated because apparently they were built so sloppy they were just about to fall over. Yet, whenever you go and look at them, it doesn't seem like there's anything that's in danger of falling over or being destroyed. So I'm not really sure what to make of it. Yeah, ceramics or what sort of materials are those? I mean, we'll be informed that's a mosaic of some sort, but you'd think the glass is obviously added later, but sometimes there's reason to question even that. I mean, and it's just one of those things we don't know. We don't have one of those little nice slides that show us exactly when all the art and adornments and decorations were added and on what timeline they were added. Nobody cared to document that. But it is a very good question. I mean, we'd think the glass was added later. That makes sense, but I don't know. It's another one of those things that I always question openly. And Brother Adam Bomb, good to see you. Flags are more for maritime recognition of states ships sailed from. That would make more sense. Flags make sense in terms of the sailing ship concept. Although, how practical were sailing ships? That's another good question, Brother Adam. But thank you for bringing that up. And you are correct. That's exactly what we're informed. And Texas for real. Yeah, more like a bad trip. That's true. Hmm. If only we could find construction materials like this today. Oh, and let me get back up the banner. Sorry about that. And then, of course, looking at this interesting set of symbols again on this arch. And then even up here, we've got the dancing people that seem to be worshiping something in the sky, powers from the sky. Very, very interesting. Some of the images, I will admit, do seem to coincide with what we'd expect to be of this settlement of the Great Plains, but they don't always. And then there's always the questionable existence of these very impressive columns. Now, again, I'm going to throw the question out there. Let's just look at this one great hall, this Senate meeting area, or whatever we're designating it as today. Oh, I love this. Sergeant at Arms, Sergeant at Arms. Yes, some things still exist, don't they? Does anybody think that anywhere anyone could build a hall like this in 2026 or have one done by 2030? And it's an open question. Does anybody think just a relatively, and let's be honest, compared to the incredible hallway we just looked at, this one's a little bit more modest. Does anybody believe that this could actually be completed today? That you could find a contractor that would do this? Yeah, I'm right with you there. It does give old church vibes. Those incredible, elaborate cathedrals, which are all over the place. Arthurian castle. And most people say no, don't think it's possible. You couldn't find a contractor that would do it. And even a contractor that would give you an estimate. So let's just say you were, the one trillionaire on the land, the one trillionaire who for some reason can't start a new political party in the United States. I don't know, maybe he just got bored with it. But, I remember he said he was going to start a new political party and then he didn't do it. But you'd think with infinite money and infinite resources, somebody would want to build something that lasts. A structure like this would be a great way to ensure that your legacy survives. Some people care about their legacy, but some people don't. Oh, there's a good one. But we would not get the permit. That's a good one. I rather enjoy that. Why aren't the benches the same material? Oh, that's a good question there, Adam. Very good question. I mean, and then you do get that impression, the tall ceilings built for giants, just like a lot of the train stations and other locations. And then, of course, the explanation will be, well, they built the ceiling so high to make the buildings cooler. Okay, I guess that makes sense in the summer, but Nebraska does get kind of cold in the winter. I'm sure it was the same back when they built this building, or maybe it wasn't when they originally built the real building. Who knows for sure? And I'm with you, Jamie. The whole repurpose thing is what makes the most sense. It's the only thing that really does. Kathy says, no one remembers the sacred geometry to build buildings like this. And that's absolutely right. And by the way, I haven't come across any AI programs that are saying that they could do sacred geometry or really any kind of incredible and impressive geometry. Just look at the artwork they churn out left and right. Again, that's just my opinion. Maybe you like it and maybe you think it's incredible. But when we talk about sacred geometry, what are we talking about? We're talking about the way that the lines all meet up in the ceiling. And you'll see this in incredible cathedrals across the land. You'll see it in numerous different structures, whether we consider them religious buildings, municipal buildings, whatever civilization, whatever nation state apparently constructed them or controls them now. But you'll see the exact same signs of symmetry and unique geometrical precision. And that's what tends to be lacking in a lot of our current structures. They lack this ability for this arc, these converging arcs, these impressive examples of something that clearly took a lot of time. We don't even have computers that can effectively do this today. Oh, people will say that we can, but if we did, then why aren't we churning out buildings like this left and right? And you know what? They don't even have to be this size, this impressive size of the Nebraska State Capitol. I would be impressed if someone could do just basically a modest house that had precision, fine geometry like this in it. Now I just can't wait to hear the comments blow up on this one, but really, give me an example. I can't wait to see Armed Forces Cathedral in Russia. Okay. Yeah, that's always the go to, isn't it? Yeah, there's a good comment. They can't arc with bricks for sure, or really much of anything else, whatever they're actually building it out of. And so I think that's really the interesting detail that we have when we look at these structures. And here's a close up here of the dome, the top of the tower of the Capitol. I mean, what exactly do these represent? I know you're going to say it. You're going to say it. It's a phoenix, even though the wings are down. I don't know. They say it represents the Thunderbird, so that's the Native American influence in Nebraska. What exactly was going on with the Native Americans in Nebraska? Well, you can look up the official history, or maybe there was something else entirely. Who knows for sure? And getting a close look at our impressive statue. Huh. What is this? Johnny Appleseed? I'll admit, I did not look up the official explanation for the statue or anything about it. It was something that I completely overlooked because sometimes even I'm a human being and I get irritated looking at the same stories all the time. I don't know, maybe that's where the statue of Tom Osborne will go once they decide to add him to the Nebraska Hall of Fame. Put Tom Osborne on top of the state capitol. Hey, at least it would make sense. And at least we'd actually have a contemporary figure who would be on top of a state capitol. And what exactly does the rest of this represent? I'm not sure. Got a little ladder up there. Apparently, there were stories of people jumping off the state capitol in the 1930s and the 40s until they made it impossible to do. Don't know for sure, but just very, very interesting. Yeah, dome covered in pennies. Is it a copper dome? Is it a gold dome? Not really sure. Autos were there. The statue had nothing to do with them. Yeah, it seems to make a lot of sense, doesn't it, Jackie? I mean, are we to believe they had some super crane that moved the statue up in place in 1932? He's definitely sowing grain, I believe. Yeah, that probably makes the most sense. Sowing seeds, planting, bringing back the land or bringing fertility to the land. It's always interesting when you look at those 1800s pictures of, well, really anywhere in the Midwest United States, just how arid and desiccated everything looked. Certainly didn't look like the breadbasket of the nation like it is today. Ah, yes. Now let's look at some of these statues near the base. So here we have Solomon, the sake of noble living. And I guess this is supposed to be the laws, but okay, the law of Solomon. And then we have Julius Caesar. Why the heck do we have Julius Caesar on the Nebraska state capitol? What exactly was he known for? They named a month after him. And it looks like we're going with the follically challenged version of Julius Caesar, not Kieran Hines from the TV series Rome back in the 2000s. And here we have Justinian, the Byzantine emperor, actually the Eastern Roman Empire, or whatever they actually called it. Remember, they tell us that they didn't call it the Byzantine Empire when it was in existence. They still called it the Roman Empire. Who knows? They can tell us whatever they want to. And then Charlemagne. What the heck is Charlemagne doing on the Nebraska state capitol with the holy hand grenade? I know I always have to make that joke. It never gets old, but I still remember my thesis that I wrote on Charlemagne if he knew that he was going to be crowned emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. Yep, those are the kind of things that historians write theses about. Did an emperor know, somebody's thoughts, as though I'm supposed to read someone's mind who existed hundreds of years ago to know if he actually knew something? Yes, it was doing that research that really caused me to question a lot of things because it's rather odd how there's only many single sources for information on, well, really the biography of all these individuals. I don't know about Solomon. You could argue that there's some more biblical accounts behind him, but Julius Caesar, Justinian, Charlemagne, and they all just happen to be on the state capitol. Is anybody surprised, by the way, that these figures are on the Nebraska state capitol? Let's see. Those were the ancient gods over the realm. That would probably make a little bit more sense, wouldn't it, Jackie? They were already there. Yes, 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 yes. It does look like those names were added in after the fact, don't they? Because they don't seem to be centered in any way, shape, or form, do they? It's really odd how the names seem to have just been very poorly added. I mean, and look at the luxuriousness, the incredible detail that goes in the rest of the structure. And I think Kathy says it very well. Nothing surprises me anymore. Homage to nobility in early America. Ah, yes. It was a whole world that excavated crater system. It's okay. It's okay. Charlemagne or Charles the Great. It depends on what kind of instructor that you have, what you're supposed to call him. So, reality elevator. What is Solomon holding? Let's take a quick look at it before we move on. That is very interesting. It's like he's holding a book with a picture of an incredible structure on it. I don't know. Is that a ziggurat? Is that the Tower of Babel? I'm not sure. Was that the original architect? Yeah, I like how they put Justinian's name on either side of his head. You'd think they'd put it above, but whatever. I didn't build it. Charlemagne, same thing. Behind and on either side of his head. Very, very interesting. For the sake of noble living. Yeah, it's noble living, all right. And then you have other images like this that are typically affiliated with Art Deco, kind of reminding us of our explorations in Kansas. So, not really sure what to make of all this. And we have these individuals just sitting here as though they're some kind of deities and they're giving some sort of favor. But I mean, do these look like the original settlers of Nebraska in the 1800s? It's just like that guy from Iowa in Sioux City that we looked at who had 14-pack abs and was 27 feet tall on that county courthouse, because why not? What exactly does he have here? Is this some kind of scythe weapon? Very, very interesting. Or is that just part of his cape or toga? Is he going naked in front of these individuals for some reason? It's really odd. It does not conform to anything we'd expect to be Nebraska or the United States. Now, we do actually have a statue of Lincoln here, although it looks like it was added well after the fact. So I'm not really sure what to make of that either. And now some of the mosaics on the interior of the state capitol. Oh, yes, it looks like we have the Kraken here, the giant beast from the sea. And what exactly are these materials? Mix of marble, granite, nice coloring. Very, very impressive. And you'll see all sorts of artwork like this. This is interesting. What exactly is this figure over here? I'll have to go there and take a closer look. Why wouldn't I be surprised if I see some Skeksis from the Dark Crystal in the Nebraska State Capitol? I just really wouldn't be. And here with these other images. I mean, here we have an homage to Native Americans. Very, very interesting that when they built this in the 1920s and 1930s that they would do that. Or is it representing something else? I'm not really sure. No, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's completely unlikely. It's just it tends to go against our understanding of what the official history is. And then here on these particular mosaics or these pictures, and we see figures doing other unique things. Again, all from the same state capital. Artwork that does not exactly seem to conform with what our expectations are. Here we have early Nebraskans looking like Romans who went and sowed the land with seeds, I guess. And here was how we had the introduction of cattle. And that's why beef is so famous in Nebraska to this day. Here's the crazy thing. Might actually be a lot of truth to those stories. And who's this figure supposed to be? Was this Octavius Osborne, the distant ancestor to Tom Osborne, who had the first football team in Nebraska during the previous civilization? I don't know, maybe. But then you'll see other interesting anomalies, such as this symbol, which appears in many different locations. And what exactly is it supposed to represent? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yes, always 8. And yes, I know what you're going to say about the logo for those of you who pay attention to the logo. And what is it with the number 8? Well, it seems to come up a lot of these structures in unique locations. Here we have the individual who is probably building the state capitol with his bare hands and doing so naked, because why not? He had a stone hammer. I mean, why don't they just tell us that story? It was one individual with a stone hammer who built the entire Nebraska state capitol. Heck, he built all 5 of them. The 2 territorial capitals and the 3 state capitals. Maybe that's what it all is. I'm joking, of course. But really, what exactly does this represent? It's to show the struggle and the hard work. And this was one of those incredible hard workers who was an artisan and a craftsman and an expert. But because he did everything naked, he neglected to pass down his esoteric skills to his descendants. And that is why we can no longer build structures like this today, or why it's prohibitively expensive to do so. Yes. And here you can see, looks like a family having some fun here in the state capitol. I mean, why wouldn't you lay down on something like this? What exactly do these figures represent? It's very strange. Again, they give more of the old classic Roman Greco image to them. Oh, were there elephants in Nebraska too? Well, of course there were. There were woolly mammoths in the distant past, right? Rhinoceroses? I mean, are we in Nebraska or are we in Africa? I don't know. I get confused. What the heck is this? A bat? And an owl. Yes, we always have owls. We know what those are associated with. I mean, what is this figure all about? Yes, this is definitely something I'm going to have to do an on site exploration of and really analyze these symbols because they interest me. What the heck do any of them have to do with Nebraska? I mean, at least if we had Tom Osborne in the middle there, at least it would have something to do with Nebraska. Now I know they built the state capitol long before Tom Osborne was born, but still, it's just something interesting to think about because oftentimes, who were the mythological, the folklore figures? Who were the famous people in the United States in the 1920s? Apparently, they were all Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, and people who wore flowy robes and had very well done hair and just seemed to live with minimal clothing and nary a concern. I mean, that's if we take the artwork at face value. I'm not really sure. There you go, Jackie. Out of place art. Yes, and out of place symbols. Hmm. Jamie, built by Dr. Preposterous. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. We'll take a look at a couple more. And then as you go up the tower, you'll see images like this. Now, what exactly are these columns made out of? Is this marble? Is this something else? Look perfectly smooth. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to get something like this in your house today? Yeah, right. You're lucky if they even make your house out of anything that's legitimate material, even wood that'll last more than 20 years before they have to rebuild it. The salvation of the state is watchfulness in the citizen. How true. And isn't it amazing how that statement applies no matter what form of government that you have? The salvation of the state is watchfulness in the citizen. Yes, that applies to a democracy. It applies to an authoritarian government. It applies to a communist government. It also applies to a totalitarian government. Because if you read 1984, they're able to spy on their entire civilization because of the watchfulness of the citizen. I know, I'm probably taking that to a dark place. It's not the place that it's supposed to be taken. But then some of these other interesting symbols here, these flowers. Where have I seen that before? Oh, interesting. Just the darndest things that just pop up where you least expect them. And looks like we've got some super horses here with an eagle, maybe a bull. But yeah, all impressive. 10 years. And then even just the random hallways. And again, seeing the precise geometrical layout on the ceiling here with the way these lines all come together. What exactly is this material? What's the material of the floor? Well, we don't have any kind of super radiators like we do in the Iowa State Capitol, but maybe we have some other kind of HVAC system there. I have the feeling that whenever you go in the Nebraska State Capitol, it's always 70 degrees, no matter what the temperature is outside or the humidity. And so that's what we have for the Nebraska State Capitol. Now, as a little bit of a bonus, I thought we'd just take a quick little look at the Louisiana State Capitol, just to compare and contrast, because, I did promise two towers on this one. And we'll just take a look at a few images and see if it looks like it belongs in Louisiana, just like those images seem to really belong to Nebraska, right? So looking at the Louisiana State Capitol, and here you have the foundation of it. Yes, doesn't this just really scream Louisiana? Hey, looks like they were showing some respect to Native Americans down there too, I suppose. And remember that the Louisiana State Capitol is completely Art Deco. The work of Huey Long, the things that they could build in a single year. And what exactly do these figures have to do with Louisiana? I'm not really sure. And they built their nice big tower down there as well. And we do have some very convincing construction images. Just amazing. Built the tower in a year. I mean, I know it's only a 400-foot tower, but it's not made out of glass. Made out of limestone, granite, sandstone, or some combination of concrete. Oh, and here's the original base construction of it, and didn't need to clear away the trees. I mean, it's only the state capitol, and they built it in a year. So, yeah, they wouldn't have time to clear away the trees, right? I mean, we're on a timeline here. And don't forget, it was during the Great Depression. So, I know. There were lots of people available to work because everybody was out of work, right? And everybody just happened to be an expert architect and expert contractor and could easily build a building like this. I mean, that's how you explain that lovely city hall in Buffalo, New York. I like this. December 16th, 1930, work starts on the Louisiana state capitol. Yep. And then just looking at another random state capital, this one in Missouri at Jefferson City. Oh, yeah, I guess this is how that one started out too. It's just interesting to compare and contrast. Now back to Louisiana. What exactly does this figure represent? Is this some kind of knight? Did they have knights that were rolling around? Well, yeah, if you look at the history a little bit, they'll probably try to say that. And what figures do we have back here? Again, I don't know. These symbols just don't seem to be exactly what I think of when I think of Louisiana down south in the bayou. But when you look closely, you'll see the same thing. And remember, all this was done in just over a year. Very, very impressive. Huh. I'll be darned. More eagles again, and even these figures here. Very, very interesting. And at least I forget about the relief over here. Yes, it was all Art Deco. It all made perfect sense, didn't it? There's always a strange energy when you go around Art Deco. Now, this is not the Louisiana state capitol. This is the old Louisiana state capitol. This was the one that was deemed insufficient and why Huey Long had to build that incredible tower, or at least order the building of the tower. Yes, you can see why a cruddy, dilapidated building like this would not be sufficient for a state capitol. I'm being facetious, but yes, I found the old Louisiana state capitol quite incredibly beautiful in Baton Rouge. Oh, and here we have one of these spiral staircases and a lovely checkerboard floor, or you can call this one a chessboard floor, whatever you want to call it. But again, giving us that appearance of some kind of impressive cathedral. And again, down in Louisiana, and with the nice little lamps here, just like the ones we saw in the Iowa State Capitol. So why wasn't this a sufficient building for the state capitol? Well, don't ask me. So if you're down in Nebraska, go to Lincoln, visit the state capitol there. If you're in Baton Rouge, visit the state capitol, the current one in Louisiana, or go visit the old one and just really take it all in because it's just pretty amazing what it was and what it could do. Now, here's the interior of the current state capitol in Louisiana. And we do see some similar construction beats that we saw with the Nebraska state capitol. Heck of a door. And remember, all this was done in a year. What exactly is this supposed to represent? These are not the exact figures I'd expect to see in the Louisiana state capitol, but I see all kinds of figures and symbols that I wouldn't expect to see in state capitals. Just impressive what they could knock out in a year. And then another construction photo. Anyway, so just coming back for more of a classic exploration here, and I hope you enjoyed this exploration. And before you go, please hit that like button, and thank you for supporting the channel. And we'll be getting back to some more direct explorations here in the month of February. And I intend to get back to weekly live streams because there's a lot of stuff that needs to be explored and questioned. Yeah, you think you get that chandelier in your house or, anywhere for a reasonable price these days? Oh, that's a good point. Religion was the government. Was it a theocracy? I don't really know. I don't rightly know. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was something more. Maybe there wasn't separate institutions. Maybe they were all one institution, or maybe it wasn't even an institution. It was something else. So, yes, live streams are always Saturday at the same time. So it will be next Saturday at the same time. And by the way, for Prime Explorers, I owe you a couple explorations that'll be coming this week as well, including the Demons of the Plains, or the swarm that threatened this area of the Great Plains. Anyway, hope you all take care. Thank you for joining me. Please hit the like button. And this is Lucius Aurelian signing off. Have a great week, everyone.